Hi, everyone. Barry McGuire here. It's live at 5 Thursdays, Mountain Time, 5 o'clock. See the halo over my head? I love that halo. Live at 5, we talk about everything real estate. Lots of times it's about creative real estate. Sometimes we have guests. A couple of weeks ago, we did some Tales from the Trenches. I've been doing Tales from the Trenches for 25 years. And tales are all about people who purchase property and who have found some problem or trouble that they've gotten themselves into. Lots of times they're investors. Lots of times it's around creative real estate. Sometimes it's just kind of basic real estate 101 things, but they're things that you need to know. So today we're going to look at three different tales. One involves flipping properties or assigning them, wholesaling them. One involves subdivision. And one involves a story around the real property report and compliance. So let's get started. Tales from the Trenches. First tale is I called it Subdivision Nightmare. Subdivision Nightmare. So this was actually quite a creative tale. So we're not going to talk about agreements for sale or rent to own or wholesaling in this particular tale, but we're going to talk about another aspect of creative real estate, which we don't teach, but is certainly out there, is certainly being practiced, and is certainly a viable strategy. And that is in Edmonton, where I practice law, the city of Edmonton changed the rules on how big lots could be. And I think they changed the rules so that you could have a 25-foot lot. And I think previously the limit was 33 feet. So entrepreneurial folks go out and they find 50-foot lots, nice 50-foot wide lot. And you can subdivide that lot into two 25-foot lots. So where you could only build one house before, if you actually do a subdivision and get two new titles, two new lots, then you can build two new homes. And of course, they're thinner, slimmer than a normal size house because you only have 25 feet to build on. And so the houses built on the newly subdivided 25-foot lots have quickly come to be described as skinnies. I'm going to go and build a couple of skinnies. I'm going to buy a skinny. I'm going to go look at a skinny. So that's the background. So our client, entrepreneurial guy that he is, was doing that. He found himself a nice 50-foot lot, and he went to his bank, to Bank A, let's call them Bank A, and he got a mortgage, and he bought that 50-foot lot. Then he talked to a builder, he talked to an architect, he did a bunch of diligence. Donna, what are you doing there? Donna, you see that hand come in? That's Donna. So he tried to decide, and in the end, ultimately decided that, yeah, he could build two skinnies on that 50-foot lot. So he finished the purchase, got the title in his name, and then he carried on with the subdivision. And by, two new titles were issued for two new lots. So now he goes off to Bank B, who is going to give him financing to build those two new houses on those two new skinny lots, and makes his application. And Bank B likes the idea. They like the neighborhood. They like the valuations, and so they give him two new mortgages. These are draw mortgages, so he's going to get his mortgage in probably 3 or 4 draws as the building progresses. That's where we come in at my law firm. We're now acting for him on the mortgaging with Bank B. So we get 2 new sets of mortgage instructions that tell us to prepare 2 new mortgages on those 2 new lots. And that'll give him enough money to build the 2 new skinnies. So we look at the mortgage instructions, and it says, as I expected it would say, that Bank B wants to be first on the title. They want to be, if you look at that title, they want to see that they're the first financial registration. Because in Alberta, when you're first on the title, that means you have the primary hold on the property. If there's anybody else second on the title, they get what's left after you get your money. So that's what the bank wants. They always want to be first on the title, first in priority. So are you seeing what the issue is here? When our client went and bought the lot, the unsubdivided lot, he went to Bank A, and Bank A put a mortgage on the property. When he subdivided that lot into two skinnies, that Bank A mortgage is now on both of those skinny lots, and it's in first position. Problem. Bank B, who's going to let him build the skinnies, they want to be in first position, but Bank A is already in first position. So brought our client in, we pointed all this out to them, and he went off to talk to Bank A. Oh, and by the way, did I say that as part of this process, as soon as our client had his mortgage approvals and subdivided lots, he demolished the house that was on the property and that was there when Bank A issued their mortgage. All right, so now we're back to visiting Bank A. He visits Bank A and he says, I need you to discharge, excuse me, itch there. I need you to discharge your mortgage that's in first position on these two lots. And they go, what two lots? There's only one lot. He goes, well, I subdivided and I'm going to build two new skinnies. And they went, oh, did you? Well, how are you going to build those two new skinnies? Because our house is on that lot. And he went, yeah. The thing is, I actually demolished the old house, but I still need you to discharge your mortgage. So how are we going to do that? They went, what? That was our security. You didn't ask us. You can't do that. Bank A was totally choked. And as you might imagine, they were absolutely uncooperative, didn't want to hear anything about discharging their mortgage, didn't want to give our client any kind of help. So there we are. Subdivided lots, two new mortgages. What are you going to do? Meanwhile, our client had also been advertising, marketing these properties. He had some great drawings, and he was doing some marketing, and he had a couple of very interested buyers who they really wanted to write offers. In the end, what he was able to do was he was able to get one buyer to turn his mortgage or to get a completion mortgage rather than a draw mortgage. So that buyer is prepared to pay for the house once it's completed. And luckily for our client, he was able to go to his builder, explain the situation, and the builder said, okay, I'll build it for you. I won't have a requirement that you give me draws at the foundation stage, the drywall stage, the closing stage, and final draw. You don't have to do that. You can pay me when your buyer pays you. So that was one sale done, but he was still a couple of $100,000 short in order to pay out the existing mortgage because he was only selling one of those skinnies and he couldn't sell the other one. And so he went around and to family and friends, and he begged and he borrowed, and he was able to borrow the $200,000 that he needed, which, along with the proceeds from the first sale, was enough to pay off Bank A. So he was able to solve his problem, but it took him a whole bunch of time. He had to pay extra interest. He had to do a bit of private financing to tide himself over. It was a mess. It was a mess. It was very stressful. It all ended well, but it sure took a long time, a lot of money, a lot of heartache to sort it all out. So what do we learn from that? We always in Tales from the Trenches, we try and say, what lessons What lessons did we learn? All right, so on that one, number one, if you subdivide a property with an existing mortgage, that existing mortgage will transfer from the one lot over to the newly subdivided lots. So in this case, it was a 50-foot lot that got divided into two 25s. But if it had been one of those rare, but they do exist, 75-foot lots, and he divided it into three 25-footers, that mortgage from Bank A would have appeared on all three of the subdivided lots. So that's the first lesson. If you subdivide, the existing mortgage will transfer over to the subdivided lots. The next thing is, if you need new financing to build, boy, you better check with your existing first mortgage lender. Our client should have gone to see Bank A and explored a little more carefully with them whether they would have given financing, or if they wouldn't give financing, under what basis would they discharge their existing mortgage? So you might have been able to work with Bank A to get financing, and maybe they wouldn't have been uncooperative, but they would not have been as mad at them as they were. They'll likely never ever get a mortgage from them again, or at least not through that particular branch. And number three, I've kind of skimmed over and glossed over all of the steps and all of the ups and downs and inquiries that you have to go through when you're looking to get rid of that old financing. So there's actually quite a few steps to it. There's quite a bit of diligence to be done. And so the lesson learned, or the warning, is give yourself lots of time to work out what that financing is. Give yourself lots of time. So there is tale number one, and certainly is on the creative side of things. If you're buying lots and subdividing, it's it's being a developer, isn't it? We don't really talk about being a developer in our things that Donna and I do, but it is certainly fits in the creative model. All right, what about number two? What do we have for our next tale? Let me look here. Well, in tales, if you ever look at my website, barrymcguire.ca, and if you look at the blog there are many, many, many tales. Wayne Hillier has said, and I love to hear Wayne say, when he got involved in real estate and he discovered my website and he listened to maybe one or two tales, he then downloaded them all onto a drive so that he could listen to them when he was riding around in his car or any other time. And I think he consumed 25 years worth of tales in like 3 days. Hey, but that's Wayne. He was on it, and he's still on it. Thanks, Wayne. I always love to tell that story. All right, so this next tale is more of a mainline tale. It's not as much of a creative tale, but it's stuff that comes up for creative investors as well as for buy and hold investors. So in Alberta, other than in other provinces, the standard real estate purchase contract says that the seller will supply a real property report, which is often called a survey certificate in other provinces. The seller will supply a real property report and written proof of municipal compliance or nonconformance. That's what the contract says, and that's what sellers are supposed to do. Just as an aside, I don't think other provinces have that kind of wording in their purchase contract. A lot of them say that if a seller does have a real property report or survey certificate, that he has to give it to the buyer, but if he doesn't have it, he doesn't have to supply it. So it's a whole other scenario when you're in a different province. So in this particular scenario, my client had been a young lawyer, just actually not quite a lawyer. She was an articling student, headed for a family law practice when she and her husband bought their first home. And he'd come to see me because I think they'd had a couple of kids and they'd outgrown their first smaller home and they were looking to buy a new home, and they found one. And so they came to see me to help them about buying the new one and selling the old one. And so one of the things I said to her is, So selling the home, see there in the contract, clause 10.2 says you're going to supply a real property report and compliance. Do you have one? She said, oh yes, my realtor on this sale of the home she'd bought 4 or 5 years ago when she was a student, my realtor now insisted that I get a new RPR and compliance. I said, oh, didn't you get one when you bought? I said, no, I didn't get one. I got title insurance. I said, oh, title insurance. Oh, okay. Well, do you have your new RPR and compliance? So I'd like to have a look at it. She goes, no, I don't have it yet, but it's on order. You should have it soon. The RPR and compliance showed up in due course, and the comment on the compliance from the city was that there were no permits for what they described as the mud room, So now I start having conversations with my client. I talk to the buyer's lawyer. I tell them what we have. I say, this is an old house, probably not going to be able to get a permit. He goes, sorry, Barry. The contract says we're entitled to an RPR and compliance, and that's what my client wants. So, sorry. And right now, I'm going to read you an email from my lawyer client. She's a family law lawyer, but she is a lawyer. I'm going to read the email that she sent me when I said to her, I want you to just kind of recap how this went for you. I'd like to know exactly how it went because I want to really understand it. And took a while for her to get that to me. We actually had to work our way through all of the problems and close her deal. But post-closing, she sent me a really useful email. So forgive me if I read the email because it's in her own words, and I think it'll be really good to understand how real property reports and compliances fit into purchases, creative or not, and why you need to know about them. Okay, so here's what she said. I was fresh out of law school and finally earning an income. So I decided to purchase a home with my husband, who is also a skilled professional. Not sure what profession he's in, but he's a professional. We knew we wanted an older character home in a mature neighborhood. We used an experienced real estate agent to help us. We found a beautifully renovated home built in 1914 with original flooring and stained fir trim. It had both front and back enclosed mudrooms. I guess in 1914, there was there were fewer sidewalks and paved roads, and mudrooms were really important. We used a relatively junior lawyer to assist us with the real estate transaction. He worked at a medium-sized, reputable firm, so I thought we were in good hands. When we went in to sign the real estate documents with our lawyer, so this is when they were doing their purchase, it was taken for granted that I probably knew more than what I did know because I was an articling student. In other words, I was training to become a lawyer. The paperwork was not explained properly to me or my husband, despite a few inquiries along the way. I didn't have a lot of experience in real estate matters. The lawyer quickly glossed over the fact that the seller was offering title insurance in lieu of an RPR, real property report RPR, that's the abbreviation. All terms that were foreign to me and certainly to my husband. Certainly to my husband. I was assured that title insurance was sufficient, so I signed all the documents and moved on. Likewise, my real estate agent, when I bought, never mentioned the importance of an RPR and the flaws in title insurance. Fast forward 5 years, we wanted to move closer to friends, kids. We found a different real estate agent who immediately advised us to get an RPR. We pressed him further. We have title insurance. Why do we need an RPR? It's not necessary. Can't we just offer title insurance to our buyer? Why spend almost $800 for an RPR when we knew our house probably wouldn't comply with current standards because it was built in 1914? He insisted a buyer would not purchase it without an RPR, which isn't true. So we followed instructions. As we were waiting for the RPR and compliance certificate, we found a buyer for our home. After the negotiations, acceptance of terms, and inspection, we got our RPR and compliance, and it turns out there's no record of a permit being obtained for our back mudroom. We assured everyone involved the mudroom was original to the house. Same trim, same doors, even the same flooring that ran straight from the kitchen into the mudroom. The permit lack must have been an oversight. So she called the city. When I called the city, I discovered permits from 1914 are simply handwritten, and there's no telling whether the mudroom existed at the time of obtaining the original permit or not. So in 1914, the permit would have said, permit issued to build a house at a certain address. No drawings required and no description of what was really being built. Very primitive back in 1914. If there was no note about the mudroom, the city said they assumed that no permit was issued or that the structure did not exist. However, in my conversations with the city, they assured me they would never do anything about the back mudroom unless there was a complaint. Considering no complaint happened in 104 years, it was a safe bet it would be fine. So we sent, all that got sent to the buyer's lawyer, and we explained and we tried to convince them that there was no danger or trouble here. But going on with the email, naturally, the buyer wanted compliance. Well, of course they did, because they got comprehensive legal advice. We were worried about bringing the mudroom into compliance. We knew it was safe, and our inspector didn't raise any concerns, but we had no idea of the cost of obtaining a permit for the structure. After several calls to the city, we were concerned that obtaining a permit would be far too costly. So we decided to try our luck at title insurance. Called the title insurance company and submitted a claim. We had to submit over 80 pages of documents. Through this process, we found how difficult it is to get title insurance to cover anything. They refused our claim as the city was not enforcing the permit issue for the mudroom. Title insurance would only cover it if the city was taking steps against the property, and it wasn't. The only thing title insurance was prepared to do was offer tailored coverage for the new buyer. Big deal. That didn't really help. So folks, there's a really important point. And that is that if you accept title insurance in lieu of a real property report when you're buying a property, and you, after closing, discover that there's a problem, no permits issued, if you have an encroachment of your garage onto your neighbor, and you discover those things after closing, and you report those to the title insurance company, they will say, yeah, okay, we get it, but unless somebody is forcing you to make changes, then you have no coverage. And that's a little known fact. Back to the email. Luckily, with the help of Barry and my interest-based negotiation skills learned in family law, we were able to resolve the problem in a creative way, and the buyer removed conditions without requiring a permit, a new mudroom, or title insurance. So essentially, we offered them a settlement, which after they talked to their lawyer, and they pretty well determined that there was no way the city was ever going to come after them. Even if somebody complained, they probably weren't coming after them. So they accepted a small monetary settlement. Looking back to the email. Looking back, I wish I had insisted on an RPR at the time we purchased the home. Alternatively, I wish we had refused to obtain an RPR when we sold the home and simply offered title insurance without knowing there was an issue with compliance. We lost on both fronts, but thankfully, our mistake cost us less than $5,000. Comprehensive, competent legal advice is critical for everyone, even lawyers. And I hope I never have to move again. So that is that's the end of the email. So what do we learn out of this one? There's actually quite a few lessons learned out of this particular tale. So number one, whenever I'm working on files, I keep getting bitten by this. If my client is a realtor, if they're a banker, if they're a mortgage broker, if they're an insurance agent that does lots of real estate related insurance, I assume wrongly that they know more about real estate than they do. I have to keep reminding myself that you have to do the same good job for all clients and give them lots of information. Doesn't matter who they are. So, lesson learned. Don't let your advisor, whoever is helping you, assume that you know what's going on. Demand a full explanation. Demand a full explanation. All right, I see Chad's got a question. So I've got 4 more lessons learned here, but we're going to answer Chad's question, which is, how about RPR on new builds? Good one, Chad, because where the standard real estate purchase contract in Alberta for previously owned homes has the clause 10.2 that says that the seller has to give you an RPR in compliance. When you're working on a new build, those are almost always custom contracts. A builder or developer goes and sees a lawyer and he gets his own custom contract done. And I would say 90% of those builders do not supply you with an RPR in compliance. They do not supply it. It's not part of their contract. So if you're looking to purchase a new build, that's something that you would like to try and negotiate, is to get them to supply an RPR in compliance. And you should also remember that if it's a new build, you also want to get a final lot grading certificate, because that's something the city requires now. So no, they don't show up on new builds, and you need them on new builds the same as you need them on previously owned. So most builders don't give them. If you don't get one when you buy, you should mark your purchase file get a Sharpie out with a big thick nib on it and write on your purchase file, no RPR in compliance, so that when you sell, you'll be reminded of that, and you can, from a position of strength, negotiate whether or not, or decide whether or not you're actually going to give your buyer an RPR in compliance. Remember, you didn't get one from your builder, so how are you going to handle that? So that's a question for another day. Cheryl says, would I explain the RPR? Yes. An RPR, or real property report, often called a survey certificate in other provinces, is a 2-dimensional document prepared by a land surveyor. Land surveyor is a designation. They have to go to school. I'm not sure for how long, but it's a post-secondary certificate that can be earned, and it's quite technical. What it does is a certified land surveyor will go and create a 2-dimensional drawing of the piece of property that you're buying. If there's a building on that property, he will locate the building and all other improvements. So if there's a house and a garage, you'll see a drawing of a house and a garage. If there's a deck, he'll add a deck. If there's a hot tub, he'll put a hot tub. And he then shows precise measurements. What's the length of the lot? What's the width of the lot? How far is the house from the neighbor's property? How far is the garage from the neighbor's property? How far is the garage from the alley? What's the distance between the house and the garage? What's the difference from the house to the main street out front? And that RPR then gets submitted, at least in Edmonton, to the planning department at the City of Edmonton for what's called a compliance certificate. And so the city looks at the RPR, they look at the address, the property, they look in their file to see a couple things. Firstly, have permits been issued for what has been built that they can see? And they look at the various measurements and say whether the city bylaws around distancing between properties and buildings and improvements, have all of those bylaws and distances been met? And that is the RPR in compliance that the standard Alberta contract calls for. All right, moving on to lesson number 2. So I guess you probably got it from the tail. Title insurance, folks, is not a substitute for an RPR in compliance. They are two completely, I'm telling you, different products. And they actually are complementary to each other, but they're not the same, and one doesn't substitute for the other. So don't let anybody tell you that they do. And if you are a purchaser, and you have a contract that says the seller will supply an RPR and compliance, then your best bet is to stick to that. The seller says, geez, I don't have one, or it's old. Stick to, I understand that, but I really would like the RPR and compliance because that's your best protection to know what's really going on with that property. So they're not the same. They're not substitutes for each other. Number 3, we talked about it in the tail, so I'm going to repeat it. If a problem comes up and you report to the title insurance company, unless somebody's forcing you to fix the problem, like a municipality, like the city, like the fire department, which is a division of the city, if you have a problem, unless somebody's forcing you to fix it, then title insurance doesn't cover you. Number 4, this is a good one. If you don't solve problems when you buy, then you may have to solve them when you sell. So if you're buying and you accept, let's just say you're buying, you're a buy and hold person, you're not doing anything creative, just going to buy and sell, and maybe if you get a nice equity pop, you'll sell. If you accept title insurance when you buy, and it's maybe you can do it because it's a buyer's market when you buy, but when you sell, it's it's kind of more of a it's a seller's market when you bought, and it's a buyer's market when you sell. That's when your buyer can put pressure on you. And if you don't have an RPR in compliance and you say, I got title insurance when I bought, would you accept title insurance? I will pay for it. Your buyer's likely to say no. Then you get your RPR in compliance. And that's when you find that you've got compliance issues with the city or encroachment problems. And you didn't solve it when you bought. And in the buyer's market, you'll have to solve those when you sell. So, number 5, as a seller, you can delete that clause that says you will supply an RPR and compliance. Yes, it's in the contract. And all of my conversation here and this whole tale has been aimed at it from the buyer's side of things. But if you are the seller and you don't have an RPR and compliance, you can try and negotiate your way out of it. You can say to the buyer, I don't have one, but I will pay for title insurance. See what they say. And so it is a negotiable thing. Just because it's in the contract doesn't mean it can't come out of the contract. So for sellers, before you list your property and sign a contract, you should really make sure you know what your RPR and compliance situation is. Did I get one when I bought? Have I made any changes to the property? Can I supply what clause 10.2 says, which is a current RPR and compliance, or not? And if I can't, discuss with my realtor, discuss with Barry or my other lawyer how I'm going to handle that. So those are 5 lessons learned from a young lawyer who didn't know a darn thing when she bought her first property and regretted it when she had to go sell. So that's tale number 2. That's one for everybody. It's not just creative. Remember, that is certainly applies for anybody buying a property. You have to consider the RPR and compliance situation. Who are you in the deal? What are you going to be doing with the property? Are you going to be building or adding on or knocking it down? Or if you want to build 2 skinnies, do you want to know that it is exactly 50 feet? So that's tale number 2. Let's move on to tale number 3. And the title of this tale is Flipping or Assigning Properties? That's a question mark. Don't go to jail. Whoa, jail. All right, so the background to this tale is that in really strong real estate markets like Toronto and the Greater Toronto Area, the GTA as they call it, and Golden Horseshoe, where most of the population of Ontario is, and where there's lots and lots of condos being built, and in the Lower Mainland in BC, where there are lots of condos being built. What happens is that as a condo project gets designed and as it comes into the sales phase, what you find is that when the condo developer or builder opens up the condo for sales, there are lines around the block. There are often lines around the block of people who want to buy a condo. They show up and bring their lawn chair and a thermos of coffee, and they wait for hours and hours and hours for a chance to buy one of these units. And why are they doing that? Because in cities or in places like the GTA and the Lower Mainland, where there's such a huge demand for condos, prices seem to do nothing but go up. So if you buy a condo in Toronto for 600,000 today, common wisdom says you should be able to sell it for 700,000 when it's built or more. So, and of course, as we all know, properties only ever go up in price. They never go down. That's not the subject of this tale. I'm not talking about the fact what happens to property prices and that there's a cyclicity to prices. We're just talking about people who buy properties and then assign them. But I just want you to remember that one point. All right, so condos have gone on sale. The lineup is stretching around the block. You get to the front of the line only to find out that there may be 2 or 3 left, depending on where you were in the line. Everything else has been sold. And that when the day started and sales opened, only 40% of the condo units in this new building were for sale. 40%? What happened to the other 60%? Well, the answer is that associates of the developer, realtors, friends, connected people often get access to those units before they go on sale to the general public. So they write contracts and acquire the right to buy 1, 2, 3 condo units. And are they going to buy those condo units? Probably not. What they do is they, as they say, they got in on the ground floor, they signed contracts, they got control of a unit or 2 or 3, and then they assigned their interest in that unit to somebody else. So they sold their contract. So that's what we call wholesaling, isn't it? You get a property under contract for less than what you think the ultimate price will be, and then you find someone to take it off your hands, and you collect an assignment fee, and away you go. So that's kind of the background for what was happening in Toronto and Vancouver, the GTA, and the Lower Mainland, and we're not talking 130 unit building here. We're talking a situation where as many as 25,000 new units in Toronto, especially 25,000 new units come on the market every year. So we're not talking small numbers here. These are big numbers. And of course, is everybody reporting all of that income? So I get control of the property for 600,000. I think, and everybody thinks it's going to be worth 700,000 when they're ready to take possession in a year. I then find somebody to buy it from me for understanding that 600 will go to 700, and so maybe I can sell it for a $25,000 assignment fee. And so, there's 25,000 doors, and as many as 15,000 of those could be assigned. Well, guess what? There's huge profits being made, huge profits. And who's interested in profit, especially unreported profit? The Canada Revenue Agency, the CRA. So the CRA, they're not stupid. They're very aware of real estate and flipping and assigning. And so they went off to court. CRA went off to court and they got court orders for hundreds of developers to have to give them all of their records about who bought a unit. And then they just follow the records. So I'm in the line. or sorry, I'm one of the insiders. I buy 3 units. I assign one unit to you. You in turn go, Barry, 700,000. Are you kidding? That'll at least be 800,000. You in turn assign it to somebody else who goes, 800,000. That's ridiculous. It'll be 900. And by the way, it won't be ready in 1 year. It's going to be 2.5 years. So there's lots and lots and lots of money being made. Now the CRA has a list of the developers and all the names of all the people, and they are going to individually investigate all of those people to see whether or not they are doing what? Are they reporting their income? Because this is, this is fully taxable business income. That's what I believe. A wholesale deal. You wholesale a deal and you make some money. I think it's business income and it's fully taxable. This is kind of interesting. Maybe the CRA can get some information, but are they going to be able to make their case? Can they prove it? Are they going to be able to really nail these people? So here's a quote from a guy called William House. Bill is a well-known Toronto tax lawyer. He said, quote, anybody who assigns an offer, sells an offer for a profit, will be caught by the CRA. 100% guaranteed that the CRA will be able to identify the sales and the amount of the gain. For auditors, can you imagine how easy this is? Close quote from Bill House, the tax lawyer. So that's kind of the background to what I want the tale to be for us. So here we are. We're in Alberta. We're in Western Canada. What's the takeaway? I mean, I think the takeaway is that no, we're not in the Lower Mainland. No, we're not in the GTA. No, we're not doing 25,000 units a year. But people are, and wholesaling is taught as a creative strategy. Some of you folks have done some wholesale deals. Anybody who's looked at the Rapid Cash program has a big section on wholesaling. We have a wholesaling course that we sell as a separate home study kit. And so, yeah, we do these things in Western Canada. And so the point of this is for you to understand that if you do a wholesale deal, sell your contract, earn an assignment fee, that is business income, fully taxable, and you should report it. Why mess around with trying to hide these things from the CRA? If you ever get audited, it will surely come out. And if there's ever even a danger that you might get audited, why take the risk? If you're operating in the creative area, I think you have a bigger chance of being audited because you're not just doing straight buy and hold. Who knows what you're doing, but anything that looks a little bit odd or out of the ordinary has a much bigger chance of having the CRA slap an audit on it. So, yeah, if you flip a property, don't expose yourself. Do the right thing. Report the flip to your accountant. Let your accountant put the best possible spin on that with the CRA. Let them work it into your other tax picture. Let them get the best result for you. Don't let them come after you for the tax you didn't pay, plus interest, plus penalties. And if it's really, kind of serious, in your face action by someone who's doing flips or doing wholesale deals and not reporting, then possibly jail. Now, jail's rare, I admit that, but there is a possibility. So why expose yourself to that? All right, lessons learned succinctly. Report flips and assignment profit. It's taxable. Lesson number 1, it's taxable. Report it. Number 2, the CRA is actively looking. And sometimes they emphasize different areas more than other areas, but they have lots of auditors. And I think when the government was cracking down on new hires, I saw a note that said the CRA had hired 3,000 more auditors. So they got lots of people to look into what they think might be a little smelly. And lesson number 3, very important to work with your accountant to get the best tax treatment. And in fact, if you're thinking of embarking on a creative strategy, especially one of the rapid cash strategies, have a chat with your accountant. Tell them what your plan is. Tell them what you think you might be doing and what you might be earning, and let them work that plan of yours into your existing tax situation to get you the best possible tax treatment you can, and to legally organize your affairs as best you can, because you're entitled to do that, and to pay as little tax as you can, which you are entitled to do. You can, oh, what's the phrasing? I'm missing it now. Avoid tax. I shouldn't have started giving a quote when I didn't know what the whole quote was. But in any event, do talk to your accountant, do organize it, do organize things to your best advantage, because you're allowed to do that. And folks, those are my 3 tales from the trenches for tonight. I thought those were interesting. Now, do we have any other questions? Donna, here's a question. Cheryl, you're a question asking machine here. Cheryl says, I just bought a personal residence and I didn't get an RPR. It is obvious that someone put a do-it-yourself deck on and a gazebo. Do you think I will have difficulties later? Okay, Cheryl. So that's a good question, and it's actually a 2-part answer. So, will I have problems later? Well, later means sometime after now. So we can deal with it when you are selling. So if you didn't get an RPR in compliance, and if you think they're kind of do it yourself, then most likely, if you do get an RPR in compliance when you sell, because you think it's a good idea, or because it's really, it's a buyer's market and sellers have to do everything they can to make their property attractive, and meeting the conditions of clause 10.2 in the Alberta contract just takes a roadblock out of the way when you're trying to sell, when it's buyers who are dictating the pace of the game. So, because that's what you think, you can go at it a couple of different ways. You can, before you list your property for sale or decide to sell it, for sale by owner, you can get an RPR in compliance and see what the story is. If the city says, oh, no permits for the deck and the gazebo, then you can investigate the what it will take to get those permits. So that's one way you can do it. The other thing that you can do is that you can right away, right out of the chute, say to your realtor, I don't have an RPR in compliance. I'm not spending $800 to get one. It's a do-it-yourself deck, which probably, should be replaced. The gazebo isn't up to much. So I'm not getting the RPR in compliance, and I'm not giving any warranties. And so let's mark that in the listing agreement. That seller will not supply an RPR in compliance for the deck and the gazebo. There's a really good chance that as long as those 2 things aren't too serious and really, well built and look like they should have permits, there's a good chance that a buyer will go, okay, well, buy me title insurance, and give me $500 for my trouble, or maybe not any money for your trouble, and I'll accept the property the way it is. So I think it's key to get that information out as quick as possible. So you tell your realtor, they put it in the listing agreement. Any buyer's realtor looking at the listing will see that you're not supplying an RPR in compliance. Many times I've seen offers amended to delete your responsibility to supply the RPR in compliance. Usually you pay $229 for title insurance instead of $800 for the RPR in compliance, and buyers will accept it. So that's kind of at the end of the conversation when you've actually decided to sell. But one other thing that you might be exposed to is that the city of Edmonton is much more aggressively looking to see whether people have permits. So if there's a nosy neighbor who doesn't like you, they could call the city and say, I don't think my neighbor has a permit for this deck and gazebo. And the city will come and inspect. And they might force you to get permits, in which case, if you have title insurance, you could probably make a title insurance claim. So most of your issue will almost for sure show up when you're looking to sell, when you realize you don't have that RPR in compliance, and when you talk to your realtor and your lawyer at the time to say, okay, I don't have one, what are we going to do about it? So there's some nuances to it, but that's really the answer. So that's an answer for sure. So I'm looking to see any more questions. I think I gave such a fabulous explanation of all the points in those three tales in such great detail. I was so lucid that everybody's going, hey, that's great, Barry. No questions. All right, everyone. That's it for today. That's it for today's Live 5. That's it for this edition of Tales from the Trenches. So I'll say goodnight, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.